What happens when a nation tries to film its own nightmares? German cinema has wrestled with World War II for over 7 decades, not as entertainment, but as exorcism. Every frame carries a question. How do you tell the story of guilt, loss, and survival without rewriting it? Some films were praised for their honesty. Others were banned, condemned, or whispered about for years. But each one dared to look history in the eye and not blink. Let's roll the reel. Das Boot, 1981. It's one of the most claustrophobic films ever made, and one of the most misunderstood. Wolfgang Petersen's Das Boot is not about victory, courage, or even patriotism. It's about fear, the raw, unrelenting kind that eats at your mind until it's all you can feel. It's about men trapped inside a steel tube under the sea, realizing that glory has no oxygen left to breathe. The film opens with the crew of U-96 setting sail, young, eager, loud with nervous laughter. They still believe in their orders, still think war is something you can win if you fight hard enough. But as the days drag on and the air grows thicker, their laughter fades. The sea doesn't care who they are or what flag they serve. It only demands patience and eventually payment. Petersen keeps his camera tight, uncomfortably close. You see every bead of sweat, every twitch of panic. The claustrophobia isn't a backdrop, it's the villain. The men whisper, argue, and pray in the same confined corridor, surrounded by pipes that creak like bones. The walls seem to breathe, or maybe that's just the crew losing their minds. When the depth charges start falling, the noise is unbearable. You don't see the enemy. You feel them up above, unseen and relentless. Every explosion rattles the frame like a heartbeat gone wrong. Did you know Petersen built a full-scale, hydraulically powered U-boat interior for the film? So realistic that actors were ordered to stay inside for entire shooting days to capture suffocation? They called it method acting underwater. By the end, they weren't pretending to sweat. They really were. The controversy came when critics said it made German soldiers too human, too sympathetic. Petersen's answer was simple. They were. Das Boot refuses to take sides. It doesn't celebrate or condemn, it observes. It shows that fear, hunger, and exhaustion look the same in any uniform. When the submarine finally surfaces at the end, you expect relief. But what greets them isn't salvation, it's destruction. Bombs fall, ships burn, and the survivors crawl from the wreckage into silence. That's the truth of Das Boot. In war, survival isn't triumph, it's punishment. It's the story of men who lived long enough to see that victory means nothing if it costs your soul. And in that silence, that hollow, salt-stained quiet, you finally hear it. The sound of humanity gasping for air. Downfall, 2004. Few films have rattled both critics and audiences like Downfall, Der Untergang. Released in 2004, Oliver Hirschspiegel's masterpiece didn't just show the end of Hitler's Third Reich. It forced Germany and the world to look straight into the face of evil and recognize it. The film takes us inside the claustrophobic nightmare of the Führer bunker, where Adolf Hitler, his inner circle, and what's left of his delusional regime crumble as Soviet forces close in on Berlin. The war is lost. Everyone knows it. Everyone except the man who started it. And there he sits, shaking, raving, barking orders to imaginary divisions that no longer exist. But then, something strange happens. He cries. He thanks his secretaries. He talks softly to his dog. For many viewers, that was too much, showing Hitler as human, as a frail, emotional man, rather than a distant monster, felt like crossing a moral line. Some critics accused the film of sympathy, but others understood that what Hirschspiegel had done was far more dangerous. He had made evil recognizable. Bruno Ganz, who played Hitler, approached the role like a surgeon dissecting sickness. He spent months studying archival footage, working with speech coaches, learning Hitler's regional accent and physical tics. His portrayal is meticulous, terrifyingly intimate, not imitation, but possession. Did you know Ganz refused to begin filming until he could replicate Hitler's trembling left hand with absolute precision? It's one of the most haunting details in cinema history, a physical symptom of a decaying mind. The true power of Downfall lies in its restraint. The bunker isn't filled with villains. It's filled with people who made one compromise after another until morality collapsed under obedience. The camera lingers on the faces. A secretary still typing while shells explode overhead. Officers whispering promises they know are lies. Loyalists clinging to a doomed illusion. The final scenes are almost unbearable. Hitler rants one last time, then retreats into his private quarters. Moments later, the sound of a single shot echoes through the bunker. Silence follows, the kind of silence that feels heavy, final, infinite. What makes downfall so unsettling isn't what happens, it's what it reveals. Evil doesn't always wear horns or breathe fire. Sometimes it wears a uniform, shakes a trembling hand, and whispers delusions until the world burns. That realization, that the monster was human all along, is what keeps this film alive in the cultural conscience. Because once you see evil as a human, you can never look at humanity the same way again. The Bridge, 1959. It begins like a story of youth and ends like a prayer for the dead. Bernhard Wicki's The Bridge, Die Brücke, remains one of the most devastating anti-war films ever made, not because of what it shows, but because of what it refuses to hide, the destruction of innocence. The film opens in a quiet Bavarian town during the final desperate days of the Third Reich. The war is already lost, though no one dares admit it. Schoolboys daydream of glory, drawing tanks in their notebooks, practicing their salutes. When they're told they'll finally defend their homeland, pride swells in their chests. They're going to be heroes, or so they think. Their mission? To defend a small bridge that holds no military value. No generals, no strategy, just a handful of frightened kids guarding a meaningless patch of concrete while the world collapses around them. Wicki's direction is unflinching. His camera never looks away as their bravado dissolves into terror. They scream, cry, and clutch their rifles as bullets tear through the fog. Every frame feels personal, because for Wicki, it was. Did you know Bernhard Wicki had been imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp as a young man? That experience bled into every shot. He didn't make a war film, he confessed. Shot in stark black and white, The Bridge feels like a photograph left too long in the rain, smeared, real, and impossible to forget. There's no rousing score, no slow-motion heroism, just mud, tears, and silence. When it premiered in 1959, some politicians protested, claiming it dishonored the German soldier. Wicki's answer was simple. It wasn't dishonor, it was true. The Bridge shattered the illusion of noble sacrifice. It wasn't about bravery, it was about betrayal. The adults who sent these children to die had already surrendered in spirit. They just needed someone else to fall in their place. The film's final moments are quiet. The smoke clears, the bridge stands, and the bodies of the boys lie scattered beneath it. A narrator's voice, steady, almost gentle, says that their deaths were as meaningless as the bridge they died defending. No flags, no victory, no redemption, just a loss. That's why The Bridge remains one of the most painful films in German history. It doesn't ask you to cry for the dead. It asks you to question living. Because in war, it's never the generals who pay the price. It's always the children. Stalingrad, 1993. By the early 1990s, Germany had long avoided one of its most haunting subjects, the Eastern Front. When Stalingrad arrived in 1993, it ripped that silence wide open and poured ice water into the wound. Director Joseph Vilsmeyer's film isn't a tale of courage or honor. It's about what happens when all those words stop meaning anything. Set during the infamous 1942-43 siege that swallowed nearly 2 million lives, Stalingrad follows a platoon of German soldiers from sun-drenched triumph in Italy to the frozen nightmare of the Russian winter. At first, they still believe in the cause. They still believe in survival. But as the snow deepens and hope shrinks to the size of a tin ration can, belief itself starts to rot. Vilsmeyer's lens is merciless. The camera drifts through bombed-out streets, lingering on faces that no longer know what side they're on. You can almost feel the frostbite spreading, the exhaustion thick as the smoke that clings to their skin. Did you know the film was shot in real sub-zero conditions in Finland and Poland? Vilsmeyer refused to fake the cold. He wanted it to seep into the actors' bones. Some days the crew couldn't even roll film because the cameras froze. The suffering you see isn't cinematic illusion, it's physical truth. The controversy came not from violence, but from empathy. Stalingrad dared to show German soldiers not as villains, but as men collapsing under the weight of an empire's lies. They aren't absolved, they aren't celebrated. They're simply there, starving, terrified, human. Vilsmeyer makes you feel every surrender, not just of battle, but of dignity. When a soldier tosses his frozen gun aside and falls to his knees in the snow, you realize that there's nothing left to fight for. Not ideology, not survival, not even meaning. The film's ending is as quiet as death itself. Two survivors stumble through an endless white wasteland, freezing slowly in each other's arms. There's no score, no fade to black, just silence, the kind that sounds like the earth closing over everything it's buried. That's what makes Stalingrad unforgettable. It isn't about losing a battle. It's about losing your soul, inch by inch, heartbeat by heartbeat, in a land where even victory means starvation. Stalingrad isn't anti-war. It's anti-delusion. It reminds us that heroism doesn't die in the field. It died long ago, in the moment when humanity freezes solid and never thaws again. Generation War, 2013. 70 years after the war ended, Germany did something extraordinary. It asked itself, what did we really know? When Generation War, Unsere Mütter, Unsere Väter, aired in 2013, it wasn't just television. It was a national reckoning broadcast across millions of living rooms. Over 3 nights, viewers followed 5 young friends, 2 soldiers, a nurse, a singer, and a Jewish tailor, as they stepped into the storm of World War II. They promised to reunite after victory, but victory, like innocence, doesn't survive long in wartime. The series opens with laughter, youth, and the glow of possibility. But by the second episode, the masks begin to slip. Each character faces a moral test and fails it in their own way. Friendship fractures under ideology, love curdles under fear, and the belief in doing what's right becomes a weapon used against them. Visually, Generation War is lush and cinematic. The battle sequences are brutal but elegant, filmed with the rhythm of nightmares. The quiet scenes, a nurse washing blood from her hands, a soldier burning letters from home, are even harder to watch. Did you know the series took over a decade to develop? Producer Nico Hoffman wanted to capture what he called the gray zones of history, where no one is innocent and everyone is compromised. The reaction proved him right. When it aired, the show became both a phenomenon and a lightning rod. In Germany, it was praised for honesty. In Poland, it sparked outrage for depicting Polish resistance fighters as hostile to Jews. Historians debated it for months. Politicians weighed in. Families argued around dinner tables. What made Generation War so controversial wasn't its brutality. It was its empathy. For once, the camera didn't point at heroes or villains, but at people too ordinary to fit either mold. Each episode ends not with a twist, but with erosion. The erosion of loyalty. The erosion of self. By the time the 5 friends meet again, or what's left of them, the war has devoured everything they once believed in. There's a moment near the end when one character says quietly, "We were 5, and now we're nothing." That single line carries the weight of a nation. Generation War isn't just a story about conflict. It's about inheritance. The kind you can't spend, can't erase, and can't forgive. It leaves you with a question that still lingers today. If you were there, in that moment, at that time, how sure are you that you would have been any different? Europa Europa, 1990. It sounds impossible, but it's true. Europa Europa, directed by Agnieszka Holland, tells the astonishing true story of Solomon Perel, a Jewish teenager who survives the Holocaust by masquerading as Aryan, even joining the Hitler Youth. Every moment is a tightrope walk. Each word he speaks could expose him. It's not a war movie, it's a masquerade played for survival. The film shocked audiences with its blend of absurdity and horror. Perel's deception forces him to say the slogans of the people who'd kill him if they knew. It's both tragic and surreal. Did you know the real Solomon Perel consulted on the film and broke down during filming, reliving the fear he thought he'd buried? His life became both testimony and warning. The controversy wasn't about facts. It was about tone. Holland dared to make moments of dark humor amid tragedy, reminding us that absurdity was part of survival itself. Germany hesitated to embrace the film, even as it won awards abroad. It was too strange, too personal, too unfiltered. Europa Europa asks one unbearable question. What's left of you when your identity becomes your disguise? The Nasty Girl, 1990. Some wars never end. They just move into libraries. Michael Verhoeven's The Nasty Girl, Das schreckliche Mädchen, follows a young German student, Sonja, who dares to ask a simple question. What did her town do during the war? The answer, or the refusal to answer, turns her entire community against her. It's based on the true story of Anna Rosmus, whose research into her hometown's Nazi past made her a pariah. Verhoeven directs it like a surreal detective story, blending courtroom drama with dark comedy. Did you know that the title wasn't about Sonia's personality, but the town's insult toward her? She wasn't nasty, she was inconvenient. When the film premiered, many German audiences found it too close to home. It wasn't about the war itself, but the silence that followed. The denial, the rewriting, the selective memory. In a decade when Germany wanted to move on, the nasty girl dragged the skeletons back into daylight. It reminded everyone that the most dangerous thing in post-war Germany wasn't a secret, it was the truth. The White Ribbon, 2009. Michael Haneke's The White Ribbon, Das Weiße Band, is set before the war, but it feels like the calm before an explosion. Shot in haunting black and white, it takes place in a small German village before World War I, where strange punishments, accidents, and whispered cruelty infect everyday life. The children are obedient, the adults are strict, and everyone hides something behind polite smiles. Haneke never mentions the future, but the implication is clear. This is where fascism begins, in control, shame, and silence. Did you know the film's stark cinematography was modeled after early German silent films to make the story feel like a memory rather than a drama? It works. Every image looks like evidence in a case against humanity. When it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, critics called it the anatomy of obedience, but others found it too cold, too calculated, a film that doesn't explain, only observes. That's exactly why it's so unsettling. The White Ribbon doesn't show war, it shows the roots of it, the slow conditioning of cruelty, learned young and remembered well. It asks the question no one wants to answer. What if evil doesn't begin with monsters, but with manners? Heimat, 1984. Some films tell a story. Heimat tells a century. Edgar Wright's monumental 1984 epic spans generations in a small German village, following one family through war, recovery, and rebirth. It's quiet, patient, intimate, yet vast enough to hold the weight of history itself. What made it controversial wasn't violence or ideology, but honesty. Wright stripped away national myth and nostalgia, showing ordinary Germans just trying to live, love, and forget during extraordinary times. The word Heimat translates roughly to homeland, but in Wright's hands it becomes something more. A question. What does home mean when history won't let you have one? Did you know the series took over 11 years to plan and was filmed in both color and black and white to represent emotional rather than chronological shifts? That decision alone divided critics. Some saw it as genius, others as manipulation. Heimat refused to simplify. It didn't blame or absolve, it just remembered. And that, in post-war Germany, was a radical act. Because sometimes, memory is the most dangerous weapon of all. The Tin Drum, 1979. If German cinema ever had a fever dream, it was the Tin Drum, Die Blechtrommel. Volker Schlöndorff's adaptation of Günter Grass's novel shocked the world in 1979 and kept shocking it for decades. The story follows Oscar, a boy who decides to stop growing as the Nazi era begins. He refuses adulthood, pounding his toy drum as the world descends into madness. It's grotesque, poetic, funny, and horrifying, sometimes all in the same scene. Schlöndorff turned Grass's surreal allegory into a circus of guilt and resistance, a story about innocence weaponized against hypocrisy. Did you know The Tin Drum won both the Palme d'Or and the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, yet was banned in several regions for decades due to its unflinching depiction of wartime corruption and moral decay? Even Grass himself admitted it made him uneasy. Its controversy never faded because its message never aged. Germany's lost childhood wasn't symbolic. It was real. When Oscar finally beats his drum amid the ruins, the sound is defiance and confession all at once. Some films explain history. The Tin Drum remembers what history feels like. Loud, chaotic, and impossible to outgrow. So there you have it. 10 films that dared to make Germany look at itself. They weren't just about war. They were about memory, guilt, and the fragile art of telling the truth. From Das Boot's claustrophobic humanity to the Tin Drum's surreal rebellion, each film cracked open history's silence and made it speak. If cinema is a mirror, these films didn't flatter, they revealed. Hit like, subscribe, and remember, every reel has two sides, the one you see and the one that still haunts you.